Have you ever noticed the resemblance between Hulk Hogan and a certain Dragon Ball character? Like his hulking stature, his horseshoe mustache, the crazy, ridiculous, charismatic promos he cuts? That's right. I'm talking about the man that beat Cell all on his own. That man is known as Earth's greatest hero. And that man is none other than Satan himself. Mr. Satan, that is. Okay, they're not entirely the same. Like Satan rocks an afro while Hogan's got more of a floor mop look to his hair. But in early character designs, you can clearly see Satan with a similar hairstyle to Hogan's and some goatee action instead of a mustache. Regardless, in all his designs, he's either bald or he's got a receding hairline and sideburns just like Hogan. Now, is this just a coincidence? Tough to say at this point, but there's many more similarities between the two. Allow me to explain. Mr. Satan made his very first appearance in October of 1992 in Dragon Ball Chapter 393, which corresponds to Dragon Ball Z Episode 173, and Kai Episode 86. Maybe Toriyama was just really into wrestling around this time, because there was another WWF reference only a few weeks before this. In Chapter 385, after Cell punked out Vegeta with the fake scare, he buried him with a nasty elbow drop that made him look like Macho Man Randy Savage. And look at the smirk on his face. I don't think I've ever seen Randy Savage hit an elbow drop quite like that. And this chapter, by the way, 385, came out in August of 92. So it's relatively close and reasonable that Toriyama would be taking inspiration from wrestling for this portion of the story arc. And yeah, this is Japan, but Hogan did actually wrestle in Japan in the 80s, and he'd also returned to Japan just a few months later in 1993. So there, but I digress. Back to the comparisons. Like I was saying before, in Mr. Satan's first appearance, he's cutting a promo on Cell, and he's actually introduced as the combat sports champion of the world. It wasn't actually until later on that it was made a point to recognize him as the champion of the Tenkaichi Budokai, otherwise known as the World Martial Arts Tournament, but nonetheless, he's still a world champion. But doesn't that sound all too familiar? A combat sports world champion? Hulk Hogan was a former WWF world champion himself, and much like Mr. Satan in Dragon Ball, he was one of the most recognizable figures on the face of Earth. And speaking of world champions, just look at the world championship belt that he's wearing. Doesn't that winged bat bear more than slight resemblance to the winged eagle championship belt that Hulk Hogan made famous? Think about it. They share the same look and have the same mannerisms. Another thing that I also noticed is that they share similar voices, both in the Japanese and English dub, but especially the English dub, obviously. Both Daisuke Gori and Chris Rager, respectively, voice him in that same loud, gravelly, boisterous kind of way that Hogan used to do when he'd cut his promos. And he's even got his own version of Mean Gene. And while we're on the topic of the English dub, it's worth mentioning that in early products of Dragon Ball brought to the States, Mr. Satan was called Mr. Savage. So that's another wrestling reference. And even though this is Macho Man and not Hogan, the wrestling theme still fits in with the character. I've also seen comments claiming that Miss Pisa from Satan's entourage was supposed to be like the Miss Elizabeth to his Macho Man, but that's as far as that goes. The way Mr. Satan is perceived by the world in Dragon Ball resembles how pro wrestlers are perceived by people in real life. They're cheered on and celebrated by their fans, but real fighters call them out on their BS. They think they're all just tricks and light shows, like Sizzle with no stake. Ironically, that's actually what Satan thinks of the actual fighting characters in Dragon Ball. The ones who can fly and blow up planets and stuff. Like when Yamcha, Krillin, and Roshi watch him on TV, or even when all the fighters watch him face Cell, they aren't having any of his crap. Another thing are the jokes made at his expense. Like when Mr. Satan smashes through a huge stack of tiles only to fail to break the last one. Or when Cell pimp smacks him. Are these all supposed to be puns or jokes about how wrestlers are all bark and no bite? A big joke about how they can talk a big game and even look the part, but in a real fight, they'd get exposed. Something along those lines? Moving along now to the 9th movie. I'll keep this one brief because I'll make a video on this along with other wrestling parodies that appeared in the series just throughout the entirety of it. But more wrestling parodies appear in this 9th movie, a movie which features Mr. Satan pretty heavily. And I'm sure Toriyama would have been informed or at least involved with some of the designs in this movie. As the main series moved forward, Mr. Satan would shrink in size, much like Hogan would. After years of doing leg drops, he actually had to have surgery that shrunk him a bit. He went from 6'7" to about 6'3". Another thing is, his hairline receding actually ended up making him look more like Hogan. Now, ain't that one way to predict the future? Now, before I close out the video, I just wanted to point out a few other funny things that I noticed, like how the Earth screams and chants Satan's name when they believe that he's the one who killed Cell and Boo. I even made a reference to it at the beginning of this video. They're praising the devil. It's like they're cheering on the heel over the babyface, the real ones who killed the actual villains, Gohan and Goku respectively. Where have you seen that before? Oh yeah, wrestling. And the title given for episode 87 of Dragon Ball Kai, or Dragon Ball Z Kai, in the English dub goes as follows: Satan's Legion runs wild. The curtain rises on the Cell games. Doesn't that kind of sound like Hulkamania runs wild? Yes, the Japanese phrase Dai Abare can translate to rampages as well. It's just funny that they thought to use runs wild. It fits more with him anyway, which has been a reoccurring theme of this video. I also like two different aspects from Kai and Z respectively of Satan's first promo in the series. Like in Kai, when he's finishing his promo, he's going, all the people on the left, all the people on the right. It's kind of like the visual representation of Hogan's hot dog and grandstanding when he's celebrating a win or something like that. Another thing is, in episode 173 of Dragon Ball Z, he shouts to the crowd, yell if you love me. That kind of, to me, that always sounded like holla if you hear me. You know what I'm saying? That's Scott Steiner. Kind of looks like Hulk Hogan. And they both look like Billy Graham anyway, so it doesn't matter. Now, this last one made me laugh when I came up with it. But Satan and Hogan both have daughters. And Randy Orton tried to get with Hogan's daughter. Gohan obviously ended up with Adele. Randy and Gohan are pretty similar too. They're both third-generation fighters. That's just about where it ends. But they're still similar. But Gohan didn't RKO Mr. Satan onto the back of a car and then leave Adele questioning why her daddy's in pain. Also, Gohan didn't ever get his revenge for Mr. Satan lying about defeating Cell. But for all you who'd want to see how that play out, watch this match. Or just watch this match instead.